Mike, welcome. The title of this particular webinar is Sponsorship: How to Get It and How to Keep It, presented by Voodoo Speed Cult, and both of those equally as important. I think sometimes people forget about the how to keep it part because once they get it, they might be too elated that they have it. But that's not always a guarantee. So let's just talk about sponsors and how much they make the world go round.
Yeah, so as a racer myself and working in the industry, it's sponsorship and racing always go hand in hand. And it's always discouraging when you see a racer with potential, whether it's driving capabilities, attitude, whatever it may be, that doesn't understand the game of sponsorship. And that's really what it is. I mean, it's business, but it is a large game to be played. And I think that when Judy reached out to me about doing this, it's very important to me. I've done other programs with you guys where I always bring it up, but racers, I think, really need to understand how to get sponsored, how to keep sponsors, how to provide a return on the investment to the sponsor in order to keep them happy, and then what to watch out for, with it. Because as soon as you turn your racing into a sponsorship program, it is a business. No matter if you're doing it for fun, just as a Saturday night deal, or you want to go professional one day, it is a business as soon as you accept a discounted product, a free product, or money.
Yeah, that is very, very true. It's interesting in talking to people just about sponsorship and whether that sponsorship is for a race team, whether that sponsorship is for a racetrack. I always find people just describing just how people are different. Some of them just want to be involved and want to get in the game. There are some people who literally like to see their logo on the side of a race car. There are other people who really want to dig deep and activate and use it as a, pun intended, a vehicle, to help them continue to grow their brand and just another part of their marketing that they deal with. And then there are some too who want to utilize the talent, that want to utilize the driver and some of the assets that the race teams have. Just before we start talking about really getting sponsors, talk about maybe the variety of things that people are interested in when it comes to sponsoring.
When you say people, you're referring to companies or racers themselves?
No, referring to companies, like say a racer might say, "Oh yeah, I've got this sponsor here." Justin Marks, for example, we're going to have him on tomorrow from Trackhouse Racing, and I've heard him refer to the Tootsie sponsorship as great people and everything. But the guy from Tootsie's just loves to see the logo on the side of his race car going around the racetrack. And then I see other people talk about, yeah, we have this sponsor. Maybe it's a business to business deal, or we have this sponsor that really wants to be involved, and we're going to set them up with hospitality. We're going to do meet and greets, and we're going to, go to their stores or their business or meet their customers, whatever it might be. It just seems like there are so many different levels of sponsorship. Some of the variety that you see out there and what people are looking for as a sponsor in getting a return for their investment, however it may be.
And every company is different. Company A could have needs for activation. Company B could just need exposure. Company C could want to own the world and be seen everywhere. The old DuPont, sponsorship on Jeff Gordon's car. If you didn't know what DuPont was before Jeff Gordon, you sure did after that, whether you were involved or, a fan of racing or not, because that car was everywhere. And so, yes, sponsors are always different and looking for different things. And that's something that racers and race teams should always understand before just sending stuff to a sponsor. It's very common to get an email from somebody going, "Hey, sponsor me, here are my packages." I get 20 of those emails a week, but as well as anybody in this industry, but often none of those packages meet a sponsor's needs, because it's more than just about a logo on a car or social media impressions, those sorts of things. And I think that the biggest thing that racers and race teams need to do is to evaluate themselves before they go after sponsorship. 70 years ago, there weren't sponsors in racing, and that's for multiple reasons. But now it's almost become a trend. You're not cool if you're not sponsored, if you don't have real sponsors, if they're not giving you money or parts or whatever. It seems like people don't think that they are a real sponsor or a real racer until they have sponsors, and that's just not the case. But with that evaluation is understanding what you can bring of value to a sponsor, as well as the series you race in, but potentially even the car that you drive. It's I worked for Bully Dog Technologies about 10 years ago, and we would hear from guys all the time wanting to be sponsored for stuff that we didn't have any interest in or to do anything with. The same with the company I'm with now, Titan Fuel Tanks. We get sponsor requests all the time that are very just, who knows? They saw our logo somewhere and they're like, "Hey, let's contact this company." And so doing that evaluation of your program, where you run, we all love Saturday night racing at the local circle track, whether it's asphalt or dirt. But is your track, live streaming is now a thing with so many tracks, but is your track live streaming? Does that provide a value? How many people are in the stands? Is it the same people in the stands week after week after week? Because there's a value to that. If 80% of the fans in the stand are the same every week, there's not a lot of value to the sponsor, because they're only reaching, let's call it 5,000 people, versus if there's 50% new people in the stands, then they're always reaching new people. And most tracks, not all, but most tracks and race series will be able to provide a racer and a race team with that information. How many new fans, how many new viewers, those sorts of things. And so self-evaluation before ever asking for something is always important. So you're not over-promising once you start a conversation. You don't want to tell a guy that you can deliver A, B, C, D, and E and not even be able to deliver one of those.
Yeah, that's a greght point. All right, so now armed with this information, that it's not just about putting together like a cool one sheeter or whatever. I've got the information, a lot of the things that you talked about. Now I need to go out and try and find a sponsor. How do I go about that journey?
It's everyone has a different comfort level. You can just blanket call a sponsor. I will tell everyone that's watching today, sending an email to the info at a company's email address with hey, I'd like to be sponsored with you, is the worst angle. It looks like spam. It's always going to be read as spam. If you're serious, pick up the phone, reach out to the company, ask for the marketing department, and then work your way in that way. Traditionally, it's always easy to look at which companies are already involved in racing, particularly the racing that you're doing. Is it, circle track, is it road racing, drag racing, whatever it may be, because that makes it easy to see what sponsors are already involved in what you're doing. But at the same time, it can only go so far, because company A only has a budget of so much. And once they have the racers that are doing their thing, adding more racers, especially, come after, first quarter of the year is tough on budget. So you have to look at then, a wider group of sponsors. So look at the competitors for the brands that you see, all the time out there. If you see an air filter company at the track that you're racing and they're on, 3 cars, look at different air filter companies, oil companies, whatever that is, because beating the same drum over and over, you're not going to have as much luck as the guys that maybe aren't doing anything.
Yeah, and trying to go out there and find that, like you said, sending an email doesn't get much. But do you recommend to someone, pick up the phone, call someone, maybe they can get a meeting with them? What do you go prepared with? Do you go prepared with your proposal, or is this more of, hey, let me just go and ask questions to this person and see what's important to them, and then see what we can talk through that we can do together?
Sponsorship is really about relationships. That's what it is. It's racer thinks they're getting money. A sponsor never looks at it as I'm just giving a guy, money to put my logo on a car. It's a relationship. I would never, and rarely ever will I pay attention when someone just sends a proposal right away or tells me what they need right away. As a manufacturer, as a potential sponsor, you want a racer to ask what we're looking for, what's important to us, what can a racer do for a company, versus just the racer saying, here's what I've got, sort of thing. Because in the end, a racer can, if he hears what a sponsor may need, they can then build a package to that. And it's very common and very easy to build a 1-sheet, 2-sheet proposal that you can send to everybody, again with package A, B, C, and D. But the reality is once you have a relationship and you've had those conversations with a potential sponsor, you can build those packages to what that sponsor needs.
Motorsports is not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. And a lot of times you might first have to explain exactly what it is you're doing before you can start to explain to them how it might benefit them. Uh, Maybe the low hanging fruit, you would say, or people, if you knew that they were going to the racetrack already or they understood the sport. But when does it, how do you get past the point of where you're just feeling like you're spinning your wheels and you're going to this store, to this store, to this store, and you're talking to people, but you're not getting anywhere because no one understands what you're selling, trying to explain that to them?
Yeah. So part of that is your self preparation of, you can have a conversation with somebody, but if you can get them on the phone or you're emailing, have links, be able to share your screen so that, let's say, you're calling up the guys at Coca-Cola. Let's say they've never been involved in racing before and they show some interest but don't understand. Have materials ready to show them. That could be done in a proposal, but video links of your racing, in the past, or even if you haven't raced in a series yet, but be able to show examples of what you're doing and have examples of, and this is all available through race series and race tracks, but of the engagement. Again, how many people are watching, how many new people are there, the average income, those sorts of things, because that's very important to a sponsor of any sort. Everyone can afford a can of Coca-Cola, but you get into high dollar products and it doesn't make sense for every company to be everywhere. And so again, it's that understanding of what's important to a sponsor. Now, as far as you could have 20 conversations. I race myself. I've raced 30 years and I beat doors down forever to get sponsors. And you're going to hear no, 30 times. It's like might being a car salesman. A guy at the car lot, pitches 30 guys on the used Altima in the parking lot before someone really buys it. Hustling sponsorship is that same way. It's relentless and it's more work than the racing is. Racing should always be fun and enjoyable, that sort of thing. Sponsorship, having sponsors, getting sponsors it's a profession. And no matter how small a sponsors you have or how big, it is a job and you have to treat it that way. If you were, making hamburgers for a living and you made 10 horrible ones, would you stop and quit and, go somewhere else? You wouldn't. You learn how to make a better hamburger. Yeah, it's the same case here. Is it really needs to be treated as a profession, as a career, in order to take it serious. And that applies whether it's a $500 sponsor or a $500,000 sponsor. It doesn't matter what the dollar range is there whatsoever.
Yeah, I guess to use your hamburger reference too, if you made 10 bad hamburgers, you've just found 10 ways to not do it. So, now you've eliminated those at least from what you're doing. Here's the comment from the chat, and I sort of want to ask a question on top of this, but you're talking about go to the racetracks and see what information that they can give you, maybe about their fan base and some of that. And the comment in the chat says at the grassroots level, it's almost impossible to get that information from the tracks. Now, I get that your Friday or Saturday night short track might not necessarily have full demographic information of the people who are coming to their event, but what questions would you ask that racetrack operator about the fan base, about the people coming through the front or the back gate that you might be able to incorporate into having some numbers to have some of that information that you might be presenting to a sponsor?
There's a couple of different ways of doing that. We use Saturday night circle tracks. Everyone's familiar with it, knows how it works. Uh, the tracks are all usually privately owned, by an individual, a small LLC, whatever it is, that may not have that information. But often those tracks will have a national series or sanctioning body running with them, IMCA, for example, and you can get that information from there, as well as other drivers. Everyone is a competitor on the racetrack, but the truth is, unless you really have beef with another racer, everyone wants to see more racers on the track, and so they're going to share that information with you, whatever it is they may have. And if a guy's been at the track, I know a guy locally that's raced as long as I've lived in Idaho. I've probably known him 28 years now, and he still races. He's raced every Saturday through the season for at least 28 years. That guy, and he has no sponsors. He doesn't want any sponsors. He's doing it for fun, but he knows who's out there. He's a fan favorite. He's engaged with everybody. Find that guy at your track, because those guys can be a wealth of information for you. Now, they're not going to be, you're not going to be able to tell a sponsor 50% of the fans are new every week because, Joe Blow said that, but you could say a majority. You have to be very honest when putting a proposal together, talking to sponsors so that they understand what they're getting into. And as well as the track owner may not have that information, but a track owner that cares about their business, their track, will go out of their way to help get you on the track and bring you sponsors. Because if you bring a sponsor to the track, it potentially means the sponsor can get, or the track can get, another sponsor through you. And so, it really comes down to, as a racer, I've said it, it's a career, it's a job to be sponsored, but it's also about learning how to market yourself and what you're doing, because that's all sponsorship is. You could write it off 100 different ways, but in the end, it's marketing for the company, for yourself, the facility you're racing at, the series. Everybody is gaining from a single car with one sponsor on it. And so you use your resources. Not everyone's going to have it. Not everyone's thought about putting it together. But you ask 10 guys, one of them, I'm going to say, is bound to have it, especially the old school guys that have been out doing it for a long time.
How about customizing your pitch to whatever product you're going after? And let's just say you're out at the grassroots level and maybe you walk around the parking lot and all of a sudden you realize that, 15 of the trucks have farm truck license plates. And now you look and you go, hey, 50% of the cars here are trucks. Maybe you're looking for someone in agriculture. Maybe you're looking to the local Chevy, Ford, or Ram dealer, whatever it might be. If nothing else, trying to do a little bit of that research on your own and seeing what the customer base is and maybe finding someone who might want to reach them.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Out here, I'm in Idaho, and you go to the races, and 3/4 of everything is in the parking lot on a Saturday night or at the local drag strip is a farm truck of some sort. And so agriculture makes sense at a facility like that. Here in Southern California, everyone might have aftermarket wheels or whatever it is, as well as look at businesses that are close. There's a facility in Southern California called Orange Show Speedway that is surrounded by 20 restaurants are within walking distance of it. It's where I grew up. As I was starting to come into this industry, I worked for a race team there, and they were trying to get sponsorship. And this is before I was ever really into this stuff. And they kept getting turned down everywhere. And there was a Mexican food place directly across the street. I was like, let's go talk to those guys. We're eating there 3 times a week. Let's talk to those guys. and most people wouldn't think that the local restaurant, down the street from the track, or the local convenience store, whatever it may be, would be interested, but you never know until you ask. And that's the big thing, is it's always, I'll use this word all the time, but it's always a hustle, because you've always got to be working towards it to build and to gain, sponsors and support of any sort.
You never know until you ask. I can't help but think there's an old rodeo clown buddy of mine who used to do thrill show things, and he said nobody ever gave me anything I didn't ask for. So you have to go out there and ask the question, and it's true. And it's one of the most true statements I've ever heard. All right, so now we've done our research. Now we've come up with some ideas, some thoughts, some different things that we can do for that sponsor and that sponsorship. We have the meeting, getting the deal done. What's the next step?
The first thing is, everybody wants a proposal. They want to see that you put time into, I'm going to say, a professional proposal. It doesn't need to be 10 pages, but it needs to be a couple of pages that outlines who you are, your background, where you came from, what your goals are, as well as where you're racing, who your partners are, everything about you needs to be in a document. Because in the end, whether you're meeting face to face, on the phone, whatever it may be with a sponsor, in the end, whoever you're speaking with needs to take it probably above them to have conversations about your proposal. And without having something in hand, it's less impactful. There's an old off-road racer, he's passed away now, named Pistol Pete, and I love Pistol. Ran with him for years. He'd always, Mike, you got to sponsor me. And I would have loved to sponsor Pete. He was a great guy. People loved or hate him, but he was a great guy. Pete wouldn't put a proposal together for me for anything. He just refused to. And Pete was a business guy. He understood the value of it, but he just didn't want to be bothered with it, and unfortunately I could never do anything with Pete. And you might find a sponsor. Pete definitely did. Pete had sponsors, but a proposal is your first foot in the door beyond the opening conversations. And that proposal should be, pretty and shiny. You should really put some time into it. If you don't have the skills, there's tons of agencies that'll do it for you for a minimal fee. There's websites that'll walk you through it. It's, if you got some pictures of yourself and you can write a little bit, put a proposal together, because that is, for most sponsors, the most important thing when starting an engaging conversation with a potential, racer. And then once you've got that and your foot's in the door, they're having second meetings with you. There's you've got to keep it real. There's always under promise and over deliver. Every sponsor that's on here is laughing, because we've all had that guy that promised us the world, and no matter how good of a guy he was or anything, couldn't deliver on the world. And that's very tough, because in the end, as a sponsor, you start a relationship with someone, you want to work with them, you want to help them, you want to see them succeed, you want to get your needs out of it, and to have things fall short is tough. And so, whether it's promising photos, videos, size of logos on cars, whatever it is, whatever you put in a proposal and in a contract with a sponsor, live by those. That's your guide through life in your relationship with that sponsor. Is what you've put out there is what you must deliver. And that's something I think everyone needs to really take to heart, because in the end, you're only as good as what you can provide to a sponsor. And sponsors are looking for a return on their investment. They have a budget to meet, they have their needs and expectations. And then above them, the accounting department, company owners, those sorts of things, all need to see, a positive outcome from a program. And that doesn't mean winning. The fact is, you go to any race and there's 25 guys on the track, there's only one winner. You don't have to be a winner. I'm going to say for some companies only want a guy to win. But in the end, it comes down to fulfilling the needs of the sponsor, above anything else. And never promise a win, by the way. You don't go in saying, I'll guarantee I'll win 10 races this year. Don't do it.
Yeah, that would be bad. Mike DeFord is with Voodoo Speed Cult. Pricing. On the one hand, you don't want to over ask and scare someone away, but on the other hand, you need to know your value and what it's worth. How do you come up with those numbers? How do you figure that out?
It's an easier question to ask than answer, because everything has a different value. A fan in the seat is worth, about 60 cents. And that's a live person in a grandstand. A viewer on TV depends on how long that viewer is engaged for, because a viewer on a Saturday night circle track streaming, video, they may watch for 3 minutes. They virtually have no value, versus the guy watching for 2 hours carries more value with them. Photos online, whether it's, whatever the media source is, those sorts of things, they all have a value to them. And you can do it different ways. You can look online to see what those values are. But going back to what I talked about earlier about asking other racers, at your track or the series you run with, there's, circle track racing, your local circle track guy, if he can get $500 to $1,000 a year from a sponsor, that's pretty good for running a single track. As soon as he goes out and he's starting to race more tracks out of his area, out of his state, he's bringing in more impressions and more engagement, and so the value goes up. But the truth is look to see what others in your area are doing, and value that for what it is. Never tell a sponsor that you need X amount of money because it costs X amount of money to go racing. Any sponsor that you're approaching has got a friend, a family member, someone they know that if they're going to give somebody $2,000 to go racing, because that's what it costs to go racing, they're going to give it to somebody they already have a relationship and know, versus what it costs you. If it costs you $2,000 to go racing, I mean, good for you. I don't know anyone racing that cheap, but it costs you $2,000. That's not what your program's worth. So always keep that in mind of, your budget's probably, 10, 15, whatever it is, $1,000. That just because it's costing you that doesn't mean that that's what your program is worth. In the end, you're doing it for fun because you want to do it. You want to be a racer. You want to be out there, the fame, the glory, and all those sorts of things. But, a sponsor is not paying for you to get that. The sponsor is paying you for the value you're delivering to them.
Yeah, well, one of the questions that came in early on, and I think we're probably at that point to ask it. Chris Stifler writes, best measurement method to show return on investment. How to value impressions on each social media platform.
And that's ever changing too, because the social media platforms anymore are they're ever changing, but the value of viewers online is becoming minimal in your Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, platforms, just because of the oversaturation and the way things are happening there. An impression is a couple of cents, and an engagement where someone's liking a photo, commenting, those sorts of things, depending on the venue and what it is, if the sponsor's mentioned, if the sponsor's logo is clearly visible in a photo, video, those sorts of things, it can range from 12 cents to a couple of dollars, depending on what that is. There's formulas, and you can find them online. I thought about preparing something to show, but it truly is ever changing, because of the way the social media landscape is ever changing. What was the value a year ago is no longer the value on Facebook and Instagram. It's I recently had someone approach me for sponsorship, and they wanted $3,500, and they had 160 YouTube subscribers and like 200 followers on Facebook. And that's what their whole thing was about, was social media, and that's great. I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere, but that small of a reach, I mean, that's not $2,500. And you've got to, within social media, you've got to be able to show growth. If you've been at 5,000 followers for 6 months with very little growth, that doesn't show a lot of value, because again, after 10 posts, all of your photos or all those posts that you've made have been seen by everyone following you, and the sponsor is looking to reach more. And I'm not saying to go out and buy, because never buy followers or likes or that sort of stuff, but be engaged, and don't be afraid to ask a sponsor to share your posts. That's as a sponsor, you have 5,000 followers and the sponsor may have 500,000. If they share your post, it's value to them, because they're providing content, but for other sponsors and potential sponsors, it brings a great deal of value.
Yeah, it really does. One of the best things I heard actually was here earlier today. Mike Birch from Speedway Motorsports was on here, and he said, you know, both sides of it should walk away feeling like they got great value for what they put into it. And if you could have your sponsor feeling that, and you feel the same value out of what you're getting on that side, works as well. So that brings us to the next point, Mike, and that is, okay, I've got the sponsor. They gave me their check in January, whatever it may be. I would imagine I'm not going to wait until January before I come knocking on their door again next year. Once I get that sponsor, what do I need to do?
Always be engaged. I would say a minimum of once a month, reach out to them, a phone call, an email, send them photos. Yeah, again, you don't have to be winning. If you every track has a photographer that you can buy photos of your racing for relatively nothing. Buy a couple of those photos to forward on to your sponsors. Write a race recap. Content is king anymore, whether it's social media or a sponsor's own website. Content, images, videos, stories are invaluable to a sponsor, because they always need fresh content to use and to put out there. And so always be putting stuff out to them. And don't ever think it's too much. There's definitely too little. But if you've got 20 photos from last Saturday night and you only finished 18, send all of them to them. The sponsors are going to value that, as well as you keeping them updated. The worst thing is, you sponsor a guy, you sign the deal in November, and you don't hear from him again until the SEMA or the PRI show, whatever it may be, the next year, and he's like, "Hey, we're going to renew that deal." Wait, what? That don't make that mistake. Always be engaging. Now, a sponsor, again, all sponsors are different. I want to hear from anyone that I'm supporting on a regular basis. Some sponsors may not want that, but wait for them to say, "Hey, you can tone it back, or just reach out to me," or take their lead on that. Because it comes down to that: don't overpromise and underdeliver. Always underpromise and overdeliver. If you tell a guy you're going to send him a couple of photos throughout the year, send him 200 photos. I mean, that's a couple, So always be providing. There's things to do too that it always make any sponsor warm and fuzzy. Framed photos at the end of the year, with handwriting, thanking you for support. You can send body panels, from your race car with their logo on it. There's all sorts of stuff to do. You can get custom die-cast cars made of virtually any type of race car in the world now for less than $20. If you got 5 sponsors and you make one of those cars each for each of those guys, that goes a long way. I have a die-cast car or a body panel that was ripped off at a race show up at my desk. I'm like, damn, that's pretty cool. And I've got those. They're in my office now, from sponsor or from guys I've worked with and sponsored over the years, because it means something. It shows great appreciation when you're going out of your way to deliver more than you were contracted and what you promised.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I was going to ask a question, but I want to sort of follow it up in part of the ask in that should you always be pitching? And really, I think more the direction what I'm thinking is, it's great. You're always following up with your sponsor. You're letting them know what's going on, but should you always be also be asking them questions, finding out where they are in their business, maybe what you could do to grow the relationship?
Yeah, business is always ever changing. You look at, we're having a small, slow economy turned down right now. Geez, I can't talk. And with that, companies needs change as that happens. And so to always be asking questions, or what can I do for you? Those sorts of things will always, even if you're not contracted, I'm not saying you've got to over deliver those sorts of things. So always be engaging, always be asking questions, always be providing, because a sponsor, today could have, we have PRI coming up in 5 days. I guarantee you there's someone at PRI that has had a vehicle drop out, isn't going to be at the show. They need something for their booth and they've had to scramble going, oh, what do we do now? Well, how cool would it be if you could be that guy for, if that was one of your sponsors? And that's a reality that happens at every trade show, not just the big ones. There's always a need for cars, photos, videos, no matter what it is, and some sponsors don't even care about, well, no, let's say don't care, but have value in your personal life, your family life, your work life. Again, at Titan Fuel Tanks, we make extra large fuel tanks for diesel pickup trucks. We work with a lot of guys that are also hotshot drivers that are delivering, trailers across the country and those sorts of things. And, I have guys all the time, reach out going, hey, I talked to this guy and he wants a tank. I gave him your name, call you, always be hustling for your sponsors. And that's tough if you got 20 sponsors, but that's what you signed up for because it's a profession.
Hmm. Definitely. Is it okay when you're going back to renegotiate for the next season to ask for more if you're not giving more? And what I mean by that, let's just say you've grown your brand. Let's say you've grown your exposure at the racetrack or on social media. Obviously, they're getting more. But to say, hey, I'd like to do an increase year over year, but well, I'm not going to offer you anything different. You'll still get the same logos. You'll still get the same follow up and all of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a normal practice, and it's accepted practice. Because again, the world's always ever changing in the way things happen, and the value of things can drastically change in what a racer is providing to a sponsor. And so you're contracted to do ABC this year. You provided more. You can sign the same deal and ask for an increase. And everyone understands there's an increase. We all do. We all have it in our business, no matter what kind of business you're in, there's an increase of expense. And so to go racing, we understand that too. Whether it's the fuel cost to get to the racetrack or for race tires or whatever it is, we understand you can't keep providing the same level of marketing that you have for the same dollar value because prices have gone up. If it's costing you an extra $2,000 a year for race fuel or for fuel for the tow rig, whatever it is, sponsors understand those sorts of things, but you have to be realistic. I won't use the company's name, but a friend of mine has had someone sponsored who got mentioned on a big influencer's social media and immediately increased their following by like 300% and tried to cancel their contract mid-season and ask for about $100,000 more. Well,
Wow.
you can't do that. I mean, it's everything comes the way it does. business. And if you're providing more value, and you want to renegotiate it next year because you increased your followers by 5,000% or whatever it is, good, do it at that time, but also understand that there is a value, to that. And there's also within marketing, you see the social media trends, that sort of thing. You got 100,000 followers all of a sudden. When you had 6,000, how many of them are actually engaged with you? Followers really don't mean anything. It's the amount of people that are engaged and commenting, liking, sharing your stuff. That's the metrics that really matter.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is a good way to transition into what to watch out for. And I mean, heck, this could be its own seminar because on so many different levels and from so many different angles, there are a lot of things to watch out for. But let's just say you're the one seeking the sponsor. You're the one that had the sponsor, whatever it might be. What advice do you give someone in that regard?
I started this out by saying it's a business and you have to treat it that way. I can use a couple of examples. You look at the Mercedes Formula One team this year, 3 weeks before the end of the season, they had a crypto bank as a sponsor that went bankrupt and still owes the Mercedes Formula One team, a couple $100,000. The team's never going to see that money. They spend it. All racers spend the money before they get it. I mean, that's just the way it is. Back in 15 years ago, there was an off-road series that was owned by a land developer, home developer. And 2008, when the economy crashed, he lost everything. And the series closed with a few races left in the year. And with that, most racers had already got their money, but there were now a number of races that weren't going to happen. And racers had to refund their sponsor cash. Well, that's tough to do, but again, it's a business. You have to be prepared for those things. And it's, again, it's like the 2008, crash. You always have to be ready for business changes, whether it's a crash like that or downturn in the economy. Maybe the company has a problem, whatever that is, you have to be prepared for it because there's no way to predict it. I said, the racers spending money before they have it. I mean, it's a common thing. We've all done it. Any of us that race are always out spending money that we don't have yet because we're counting on it. But the reality is that things don't always, come through. And so you need to be careful. Again, treat it like a business. Don't go, overspend or promise that you're going to do this because, things can change. And you need to be able to protect yourself that way. And I'm not trying to scare anyone when I say that, but I mean, that's the reality of it. This is no matter what level of money you're getting or free product or discounted product, this is a business and it's got to be treated that way. Just like, you own, a steakhouse. This is the same thing. If you own a tire shop, it's the same thing. You've got to be prepared for anything business related. And that's, I'll say is maybe not a bad idea that I recommend it to racers every once in a while, is take an online class about business to understand business. Because again, it is a career choice, whether you work a full-time job, you're doing 3 other things to make money and racing's the fun stuff. As soon as you're getting money, it's a job.
It definitely is. All right. So, Mike, you brought up the story of, the team, all of a sudden they have a big social media windfall. Well, they just want to go right back and start renegotiating with the sponsor. Obviously not the time and the place, but let's reverse that. Let's just say you have your deal. You've got the logos on the race car, on the uniform. You're going to get them 2 pit or paddock passes for however many events throughout the year. You have your deal done. This is the price. Great. We sign on the dotted line. Now the sponsor may come to you and say, hey, can you do like 3 or 4 hospitality things and, maybe come to our corporate meeting and make an appearance and do all of these. Now, all of a sudden the ask is there, but maybe not the offer with the ask as well. At what point do you say, great, I can do that, but let's just tack this on to our agreement?
You do it right away. If it's a couple of extra photos, that's one thing. But as soon as you're going to incur costs, real costs, whether it's traveling to a trade show to make an appearance or, do whatever it is, as soon as you have to put extra effort and extra money towards something, and it's substantial, again, a couple photos, whatever, a social media post, whatever. But as soon as you're being asked, you mentioned the VIP, treatment. I've been there. I've had to go to a team and say, hey, at this race, I need to bring some extra guests. Can I get some? And as soon as the team or the racer say it costs me, X amount of money, here's my credit card, take it, because I understand that there's a value to it. Now, I'm not going to say, not all sponsors are going to be that way. We've used circle track racing as an example a lot today, and your locally owned mom and pop type businesses might not understand that as much as a larger company that's doing a lot of racing sponsorship. So, the local, paint shop that's sponsoring your drag car, and, they want, 5 tickets instead of 2 for this weekend's race. You need to explain them, unless you've got them and you're not using them, then that's great. Then pass them along. But if you've got to incur costs, pass those costs on. Don't make money on it, because the world's a small place. Everyone's going to talk at some point. You don't want to be like, okay, well, great, I'll get them for you for $15 extra, and they only cost you 10. You're making $5 on the deal. You will lose a sponsor immediately. A sponsor wants to be your friend. They are your supporter. They're your ally. Don't give the farm away, but don't abuse them as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Don't nickel and dime, but also don't allow them to start stretching you too thin. And on that, we talk about putting it in writing. Mike, I'm sure you've heard story after story throughout your career of well, I thought we were getting this, and well, I thought we were just offering that. Is putting things in writing. Everyone understands that that's the way to do business, right?
That's why a proposal is so important. Whether you have a contract with it or not, a proposal is the guideline for both parties to understand what both are getting out of a relationship. Company is getting this, racer is getting this. There's no fuzziness, there's no in between. Sure, there could be more things asked for, but when it's in writing, real writing, a prepared document, not just an email, something like that, a prepared document, it helps guide things much better. It will take away 90% of those, oh, I thought you were going to do this for me, sort of things. Well, that wasn't the proposal, it wasn't the contract. I don't know where you got that idea. And unfortunately, it does happen. It's one of those things. And also, a word of advice for racers, race teams is, just because you're having a conversation with a potential sponsor, take it as just that. This is just a conversation. Myself, everybody I know in this industry, all have stories about, we had somebody that thought they were going to be our next guy, and for us, it was nothing more than a conversation. Don't build more into it until you have, signed on the dotted line, ready to go. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. A great piece of advice I got from a sponsor one time is always bring a pen and paper to the meeting, because if you don't and they do, all of a sudden you might be talking about something and they're taking all the notes. When you go back for that follow-up meeting, I've known a sponsor or two to be able to get a little extra out of it because someone else didn't bring their pen and paper and they just referred to their notes from the last meeting and said, well, you promised this. Always have your pen and paper.
Yeah, and again, this seems sort of petty, but I will always, not always, but most of the time, I will always follow up any real conversation I'm having about sponsorship, negotiations, whatever it is, with an email saying, okay, this is what we discussed. This is what we're working towards. Let me know when you've got this in place, whatever that is. And again, that comes from me as a marketing guy and as a racer. It's helped me in both cases.
That's fantastic. Mike, what a great pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed this session, and definitely learned a lot from you as well. Appreciate your involvement here today.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the time. It's been fun.
Thank you, Mike.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. To start, click on the Join for Free button on the homepage. First, search your company to see if it's already in our database. If you see your company on the list, click on it to select it. Then, choose Claim Company if you are one of the decision makers, an owner, marketing person, or main company contact. Or choose Join Company if you are an employee, and press Continue. If you couldn't find your company in our database, select Register a New Company. On the following page, fill out your name, email, phone number, job title, and choose a secure password. If you chose Register a New Company, you'll need to choose your business type. Select Supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose Racing Business if you're looking to source new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose Race Team if you own or are a member of a professional race team. Then, enter your company name. Please provide a website, Facebook page, or LinkedIn if you have one, and choose to either claim or join the company. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Finally, click Register Now and your registration will be submitted for approval. An email will be sent to your inbox. Please confirm your email address and you will be approved shortly. Welcome to EPARTRADE.